Welcome everyone! I wanted to talk today about the idea of flow and floating. I often talk about love more, fear less, float more, steer less. And of course those are just words, so it can be difficult to understand what exactly I mean, because words are simply symbols of ideas, and we all have different attachments and perceptions of what those words mean. But these are even specifically difficult to comprehend, and one of the reasons is because these are concepts very contrary to what our basic cultural baseline understanding of how to live is. You know, we're taught to make things happen, you know, be a go-getter, be a winner, you know, go realize, you know, charge, climb the top, rah, rah, rah. So the idea of floating seems very contrary to what a winner would do. It sounds a lot like laziness to a lot of people. And I wanted to address that and maybe tell a story from my own life that illustrates how floating more can be so not laziness. This was inspired for me to talk about because, one, I had several people ask me some questions over the weekend about my path and what do I do and how I got there and how I made some specific decisions. And also, a friend of mine, Durian, told me a philosophy where he took two common phrases, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, and met with that with go with the flow. And he said, I think neither one of those is exactly right. I think it's actually row with the flow. Yes! I love that! Row with the flow! I think that's going to be my new t-shirt. Row with the flow. It's funny how any idea that resonates with me, my first thought is URL and t-shirt. So, row with the flow. I was not always a row with the flow person. When I graduated from college, graduated with honors in psychology, was very passionate about counseling and really into Maslow and wanted to help people self-actualize. And so my next path after college was going to go to grad school. But they really recommend getting some experience, especially if you want to get into a top school. But what kind of experience can you have without a degree, a grad degree? So there's this kind of very few options, one of which is working in a group home. So I went to go work in a group home for emotionally disturbed boys ages 6 to 12. And my little cottage had 12 boys that I and 3 other team leaders with other staff, these boys lived there 24/7. And then we would come in and, you know, have kind of 3 shifts through the week so that there was always 3 people supervising them. And it was a very challenging experience for me. These were kids who had severe family trauma, and it manifested in very violent and poor impulse control. What made it even more challenging for me was that we dealt with basic behaviorism, and these kids were so damaged in their patterns that the same kids that spit in my face my first day spit in my face my last day 2 years later. And every day going to work and feeling like very little is happening, just trying to have faith that you're putting goodness and putting love into these kids' lives, even if you don't see it, was just so hard for me. And while I was doing that, a lot of, you know, lessons that kind of steered me in different directions throughout my life planted seeds. But one of the big ones was seeing all these professional careers in the field of psychology. And so as I met with the counselors that came in, the specialists, the PhDs, the people with master's degrees that were, you know, significantly above me in this hierarchy, but as I talked to them and learned the jobs in the field that were out there were nothing like the ones that I envisioned myself doing. I wanted to take balanced, solid, healthy people and help them evolve to the next level of superhuman, self-actualized, you know, floating on air people. And that's not generally covered by insurance. So the jobs, which are the ones that insurance pays for, are the ones of people who are dealing with depression, serious problems with marriage, just serious problems. And even then, you're dealing with a very strict few sessions, and it's just, the more I learned this isn't what I want to do. So as I'm feeling like even my faraway goal is dimming in its light, and the day-to-day feels just horrific, I was getting really down. And the only thing that was keeping me really having any sort of satisfaction was I started making a zine, a Xeroxed paper zine called Prehensile Tales. I thought I was so clever. Prehensile tails generally are referred to monkeys that have a tail that can grab things. Prehensile means, you know, has its own ability to act or grab, and so monkeys have tails that can grab things on their own. I spelled it T-A-L-E-S, like a story. So it was filled with stories that can grab you. Huh? Huh? So I was publishing this probably 4 times a year. You know, I would cut and paste and type things out and make this thing and Xerox it at Kinko's, and then there was it was distributed then through a catalog called Fact Sheet 5, and you would get Fact Sheet 5, read the reviews of all these zines, and then trade or send a dollar bill or a self-addressed stamped envelope to people to get the ones that sounded cool to you. And it was a very labor-intensive way to publish, but it was awesome, and it was so creatively liberating for me, and I loved it. I would sometimes write stories about my job or comics or personal adventures, and it was a kick, and I really was feeling like I was finding my voice. And so as I just got more and more and more frustrated with this, my career, I actually went to like a career counselor and got the book, What Color is Your Parachute? And another one, like, you know, Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow. And side note, when my brother saw that on the table, he's like, do what you love and the money will follow. Who's going to pay me to masturbate? The irony is, years later, I discovered exactly the answer to that question, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So eventually I decided I'm going to give up. I'm going to quit. And I was very much like a linear path towards success. That was one of my, you know, big lessons of my dad, is like keep your options open, you know, kind of when you have an opportunity, take it. When you have an opportunity, take it. Always, you know, always strive for whatever you can. You know, if someone says there's a new position that's coming available, you apply for it. And so for me to say, you know what, I'm not going to go to grad school, instead I'm going to well, what I did was I went back to junior college and started taking design classes to try to make my zine cooler and better. Not exactly a path with a lucrative end in mind, but for some reason this counselor was, you know, coaching me on how to very rudimentary methods of following my heart. And my parents actually, I thank them for this all the time. I thank them for this moment when they said, okay, if you want to follow this, if this is where your heart is taking you, then go for it. We'll support you. Not financially, but we'll support you emotionally. And because they wouldn't support me financially, I went to work in a call center. Some good friends worked in this call center, and it was this place where it was a call center for like dozens of clients, and we also had a warehouse where we would hold their products. So they would call the call center, the number would come up on the screen that would tell us what client it was, and we would say, oh, welcome, thank you for calling Spectrum Holobyte, or thank you for calling Thornton Winery, or thank you for calling Sony. That was one of our clients. And I still had some of my go-getter attitude, so when I saw that it seemed like we should have a company newsletter for all the call center people, I offered to make it. And because I was having so much fun with the zine, I was like, well, maybe I could make this funny, and I could make a funny newsletter for our call center. And it was very popular, and people loved it, and I kind of developed this philosophy towards a lot of my work that I do, which is, you know, no matter what you're doing professionally, there's people on the other side. And so communicate to them as if you're talking to people. So be funny, or be interesting, or something. Don't just like hammer, you know, be dry, because people don't, I know I wouldn't want to read that. So I would joke and be very silly, and had a blast with it. And then actually got, you know, graduated and became a trainer. And so I was still kind of taking the opportunities as they can, but you know, this was clearly something in between as I figured out what I was doing, as I learned how to make an awesome zine. learning how to use computers and Photoshop. This was very new. I had an old Mac. It was very exciting, but, you know, not exactly a massive career path I was on. And then one day, I got called downstairs. Now, upstairs was the call center. Downstairs is where all the executives and the account reps and all the people who wore suits. We were never to go down there. But I was called downstairs. Very strange. So I went down there, got called into the main conference room. It was filled with people in suits, like a dozen of them. I walk in the room, and the VP is holding up my zine. Apparently it had been passed around all over the call center and made it downstairs. And he's kind of looking at me and says, "Is this yours?" I was like, thinking to myself, there's no way I care enough about this job to sit here and be chastised by a bunch of guys. So if you want to fire me, like, let's just say it, because I'm not going to defend myself over this job. And they're like, "You seem pretty creative. Is answering phones what you want to do with your life?" I was like, "No." Like, because here's what we're thinking. This was in '95. They said, "We keep hearing about the internet and the World Wide Web, and we're thinking it might be a good idea for you to go learn about it. We've hired a consultant to come in, this programmer who's going to help you get up to speed, take your little magazine, put it on the web, learn the ins and outs of how that works, and then once you've got your magazine online, take those skills and make us a company homepage, and you'll be our webmaster." I'm like, I start chuckling. I'm like, what? Is that a real word? Like, webmaster? That sounds like I would be wearing like a cloak and having a staff, but they're like, that's the title. So here I was, just floating, and all of a sudden, boom! Without knowing why, the current smacked me right into this promised land of the internet. Now, was the floating done? No, because very soon this fulfillment company realized, wait a minute, we have clients like Sony and all these, and we have all their fulfillment goods, and we're taking their orders. Why don't we take their orders online? So they said they made a meeting with the Sony execs to try to pitch them on us being their online mall. And all of our clients, hey, well, this is a new thing, the internet. We know how we're masters at it. You know, we got it all down. We'll do your mall. Meanwhile, we're like, what are we doing? And so before the meeting with Sony, they pulled me aside. The VP's like, "Look, here's what I want you to do. No matter what question is asked of you, you respond. That's a great question. Let me check with my programmers and get back to you." And he had me practice that. So then the meeting came. I had long hair at the time, so I was like the creative guy, but I wore a tie and had long hair, and I was like, "That's a great question. Let me just talk to my programmers, and I'll get back to you." So then the meeting we went and had these consultants help us figure out what the answers to their questions were. Apparently we fleeced them because we got the contract, and my first job, I didn't know anything about computers. I didn't know how to type. I didn't know how any programming, nothing. My first job was the webmaster for Sony's online store. It was called the Sony Station at the time, as well as, you know, our company homepage and other things. So here I am thinking that I'm, you know, being careless with my career, and suddenly I'm thrust into a serious job. From that, I continued working on my magazine. The magazine, because the internet was very small at the time, there was actually a site called Cool Site of the Day, that there was so few new sites that you could check Cool Site of the Day and feel like you kind of were up to date. Now you have to read like 100 blogs all day just to feel like you know what's happening. Anyway, so prehensile.com, I registered that eventually. When I look back though and I think about how many domains were available then, and that I chose Prehensile, it makes me crazy inside. So Prehensile, it's going along, it's got a nice little following. I'm just kind of blown away. The internet is so new that, like, if you're out in public at this time, it's like '96, and if I heard somebody say www, I would like interrupt their conversation and go, "Oh, you're online?" Because I was so excited about the potential. I mean, the minute I saw that I got a comment from somebody in China, or I can't remember where it was actually. I think it was, may have been Europe somewhere, and I was just like, I I spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hundreds of dollars publishing to 100 people with my zine. Here I am publishing to hundreds of people for nothing like that. And then when I said, wait a minute, basically everybody can have their own TV station. Of course, it took about a decade before bandwidth and everything caught up to that, but I saw it immediately. It changes everything. Everything. So then I started putting my paper zine online, and after a couple months, I got a cease and desist order from Fruit of the Loom, the underwear giants, Fruit of the Loom. I had written some silly parody article where I was just kind of talking about what a crazy name that is for a homophobic nation to be cradling their manly goods with. Fruit? Really? Hey, kudos to your marketing team. I'm just surprised. And then I hypothesized about a bunch of other potential names that they must have, what did they reject if they picked Fruit of the Loom? And so I got a cease and desist. And at the time, my dad was a lawyer. And so I asked him, I'm like, Dad, isn't this parody? He goes, I'm sure it was just, they did a massive search and they just sent these blanket emails out. So just write back and explain to them that what you're doing is parody and maybe there's been a misunderstanding. And if they could explain to you if there's certain issues that they have with what you're doing, maybe you can figure it out. And they wrote me back and in essence said, look, kid, we have so much money and so many lawyers. You're a little kid and we're going to crush you if you really make this hard for us. And so here I am. I'm early 20s. I'm living at my parents' house. I have very little possessions. And I am literally high on the potential power of the internet. And some old school company is telling me that they want to impose the old rules of hierarchy and power on me. And I was like, oh. So I published all of our correspondence online, and I started reaching out to other publishers online that I knew and said, hey, will you help me spread the word that I'm getting pushed around? That's not the way the world works anymore. And so people, good friends of mine at the time who've gone on to be like really powerful internet players and have influenced all sorts of impressive things, humbling. But at the time we were all independent publishers, and they put little banners that said, keep your looms off our loins, and freedom of speech doesn't end at an elastic waistband. Wired picked up the story, and before long, people were just writing these horrible, angry things to Fruit of the Loom, which ended with Fruit of the Loom saying, okay, hey, sorry, our bad, our bad. And it was one of the first examples on the internet of collective action against a large corporation that worked. And so here another, the river steered me into a rock. And that rock deflected me into this amazing arena where after this happened, suddenly I was in a very high-profile place. I ended up getting asked to speak at conferences about publishing and all sorts of things, and suddenly was an expert, and my career just started taking off in the direction of not just of technical webmaster, but of as publisher and as an internet expert and things like that. It was amazing! And so then, once I had this kind of notoriety from the Meat of the Loom lawsuit, from that, I got asked to join a site called collegeclub.com, which was at the time the largest college community. It was basically the Facebook of the time. And I got asked to join and be the spokesperson, like Tom at MySpace. I was the one who greeted all the new members and sent out newsletters. Newsletters is kind of a theme in my life. And became deep in this new concept online of community building. It has since become social networks, but at the time it was community building. And so as this whole new, each time, just like the flow, taking me to this brand new thing and allowing me to stumble and learn and find my way and then develop an expertise, which would then lead to the next thing and lead to the next thing. Some of those things that it led to, still trying to figure out how that works into the grand plan, but at the time it felt right. At the time it felt right. And so now, years later, I'm once again in the realm of community building, social networking, and trying to amplify the love in this digital world. Very quickly, simply by letting go of the way I thought I was supposed to go and surrendering, feeling where the current was taking, and then rowing with the current, row with the flow, I got popped into this place of a brand new career that didn't even exist when I was in college, that was paying well, that was very creative, that I had all sorts of respect from my peers, all because I just surrendered. I didn't just lazily just go, whatever happens, happens, but I surrendered, and then when I felt the flow, went that direction. And here's where, to me, it gets beautiful, is that just recently I was looking at how I spend my Tuesdays and how we shared this time like right now. And I realized I talk about self-actualization. My job is exactly what I wanted to do when I was a kid. And by being not attached to the path, by being totally not focused on the destination, by simply allowing the flow and the current to take me where I needed to go, to have the adventures I needed to have, even though along the way I definitely got into some alleys and areas where people all around me were like, you are making a huge mistake, you are closing doors for yourself, you are gonna, this is a terrible career move. But now, here I am, spreading the word of self-actualization and growth and positivity, and trying to help people who are generally healthy become amazing. That's what I've always wanted to do, and it happened. Amazing. Amazing. I feel so blessed. And the culmination of all of that floating has been Hug Nation. So, as we approach half past, will you join me in a Hug Nation hug? An action, a moment, an experience that we have been drawn to by whatever place. I assume that no one steered their way here, because how could you? You had to have floated in some way. So come on in, the water's fine. Grab yourselves by the shoulders. And as you grab these shoulders, recognize that this body, this raft, it can help you fight the current. It can help you go with the current. It can help you tread water. It can help you rescue others. It is a gift. And beneath this meat ship is all the roles that you assume to do the things you need to do to make it in the world. And sometimes we get caught up in those personality issues, or identities, whether it's a nationality or a religion or a political party or a philosophy. But know that beneath all that is something we share with everyone in the world, which is a connection to Source, a fire, a little light, a spark that connects us, that when we strip it all away we can get in tune with that flow and that harmony, the flow that we can row with, the flow that takes us where we need to be, that shows us what we need to know about ourselves so that we can be vessels of love and tools of the universe. So let's forgive ourselves the times we get off track and in our story, as well forgive all the people we cross and pass that also are caught in their story, that may think that we are in their way, or we are an enemy, or we are an obstacle. We get in that frame of mind too. But let's look through that shell and see the seed inside, and how it is beautiful and reflects our own, and helps us see that everyone is just layers and layers upon top of a beautiful, beautiful fire. So let's see all the light. See right through the shells of everyone in your life, everyone on the news, everyone in your office, and just love them so deeply love the truth inside them, and forgive everything else. On behalf of Grandpa Caleb and all the Love Warriors, happy Hug Nation. Thank you for sharing this moment, surrendering to it, being love, amplifying love, and being an ambassador as you walk the world. You are a gift, and I thank you. I love you. Namaste.
You only live once. Enjoy the color.